we've had visitors. I know this clapping thing is like not the norm. So, I don't know, some people are more excited. Again, welcome, particularly those of you who are here for the first time to recognize how intimidating it can be to walk into a church where you don't know anybody. You don't know what kind of church this is going to be. Are they going to be crazy? Are they going to be creepy? Are they going to lock the doors? Are they going to pass the offering plate 6 times? Yes, all of those things. The doors are already locked. You know, the offering plate is coming about 6 more times. I forget what our goal is, but we're gonna get there this morning. Really exciting. Not really. And here's what I tell people when they ask about the church. What kind of church is it? I just say we're non-denominational. To us, that means we love Jesus, we believe the Bible, and we're not mad at anybody. And we typically only pass the offering plate once. So that's where we're at. Thanks for joining us. Again, this morning we're talking about the fact that Easter changes everything. Every once in a while there is something in life that comes along that changes everything. For those of you parents who are watching small children run around in that Easter egg hunt, you know that parenting is one of those things that absolutely changes everything. Marriage is a big deal, but it's nothing like parenting. So I talk to young couples, they're getting ready to get married. You know, in the process of that, you do some counseling, you talk through things, you ask questions, what are you thinking about kids? And, you know, one of the partners going into the marriage, they're like, yeah, kids eventually, that sounds good. The other one's, you know, just completely freaked out at the whole concept. But if you're anything like my wife and I, there is a time in the marriage, 3-4 years in, where this crazy idea of having kids, this scary, that's going to change everything, I don't want to go there idea, it gives way to a biological clock that starts ticking a little bit more loudly, and all of a sudden we start thinking, you know, maybe, just maybe, we're ready to absolutely change everything. So the office becomes the nursery, and our date nights, they become a distant memory, and absolutely everything changes. I remember before we had kids, we lived in Dallas at the time, concrete everywhere. It wasn't like Ann Arbor with all the trees. We didn't like the concrete, we liked the Tex-Mex, we missed that. But there's a place in Dallas that we'd love to go. It was the Arboretum. Many acres, just this huge space that they said, we have, you know, paved over paradise, we have turned so much of the city into concrete, but we're gonna have this place that's flowers and trees, and it's beautiful. So we got a membership, my wife and I, we would love to go to the Arboretum, and we just enjoyed it. And we would walk romantically, hand in hand, and stare into each other's eyes, and it would be our reprieve of the week, when we get out in nature and we just enjoy the creation. And then Luke came along, and Luke changed everything. That meant that I can't hold my wife's hand anymore because we had one of those super-sized 5 aunts go together to buy you the Eddie Bauer, you know, Cadillac super-sized stroller thing that needs 2 hands to push. You can't hold your wife's hand, you gotta have that. You have the kind of the olive green, you know, diaper pack that's strapped over my shoulder, you know, ready for battle, ready for anything. Because Luke had changed everything. Travel was completely different. I had not flown very many times before we had Luke, but flying with a 3-month-old, with a 2-month-old, I would not recommend it. You're trying to be courteous to all the people around you, and so you know you've got this kid, and if you just confine him to a space, it's a little boy. He doesn't want to be confined to a space. He's going to go crazy. So you got to move him. You got to work him around. So I'm getting this arm workout where I'm like reaching out over the aisle, you know, moving him around, kissing him, keeping him content. Because having a baby, it changes absolutely everything. It changes travel, it changes the routine, it changes the smells. You know, I used to walk in the house, the first thing that hit me was my wife's perfume. It smelled lovely. It was a long time before I noticed the smell of my wife's perfume anymore. We had to get through a couple of kids and get them out of diapers before there were any smells that came over the dominant smell. Because children and having kids, it changes absolutely everything. I remember going to Target for the first time with a kid. And, you know, when you're single, when you're a college student, when you're a young married, when you're an empty nester, whatever, Target's easy. Target's great. It's better than Walmart, and you can just slide in there, slide out, no problem. But you can't jog across the parking lot with a newborn. You just can't do it, you know? So don't shake a baby like, yeah, this would be shaking. I can't do this. And, you know, you got to figure out the seat, you got to figure out all of it, and then in that season of life, if you're anything like me, you're just kind of so on overdrive and worn out and muddled in your thinking because of your lack of sleep that once you get into Target, you're holding your baby, you're proud of yourself, and you figured out the car seat, that one too. You get there and you come in, you turn around the corner in the Target and you say, why am I here? I have no idea why I'm here. And the first time that you do that as a husband, it's kind of cute because you call up your wife and you're like, why did I go to Target? What was I supposed to pick up? And you have a good laugh. But like the third or fourth time, it's just embarrassing. But it is the new norm because parenting has changed everything. And I know not all of us are parents. Some here, no doubt, aspire to be parents. And it's a painful thing, desiring to be a parent, and you haven't been able to do that yet. Many of you, you're in a season of life where the idea of procreation, it is way off in the distance, not thinking about that at all. But all of us have had situations in our life, something that comes along that absolutely changes everything. Maybe it was cancer, maybe it was the death of somebody near. Maybe it was something good, like getting your driver's license, or the day that you graduated and you moved out, moved into your first dorm room or your first apartment, and you were free, and it changed absolutely everything. But there are moments in our lives that come along that change absolutely everything. And this morning we are celebrating one of those moments. We are celebrating the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And the reality that the resurrection changes everything. Not just in theory, not just for the world, but for me. So this morning we're going to be in John 20. We're going to meet people who came face to face with the resurrected Jesus. And we're going to look at how the resurrection, the original Easter morning, changed everything for them. And talk about how it can change everything for us. But if we want to understand Easter, we need to set the context a little bit. We need to understand not just that Jesus rose from the dead, but why did Jesus die? Why did Jesus become a man to begin with? And I would say that all of us have gathered here to celebrate Easter because there was a moment in time, a moment in history, where an apple changed absolutely everything. A silly little apple changed absolutely everything. It starts back in the garden. We meet a God who loved us, who created us for a relationship, who wanted to be with us, just wanted to do life with us. And he had one simple rule. It was, do not eat from this tree. Do not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And for like 2 pages of the Bible, everything was perfect. They're living in paradise. Everything is great. And you get to page 3 and the wheels fall off. Because of a 3-letter word that we call sin. Because humanity rebelled against God. Because humanity said, you know what, God, you have your way, but we have our way, and we think that our way is going to be better than your way. Because Adam and Eve ate an apple. And it would be easy to look at that and say, okay, what is the big deal? I've seen some sins in the world, that Holocaust, Hitler, Darfur, all sorts of major sins in the world. Why is God so bent out of shape about an apple? Has anyone ever wondered that? Why is God so bent out of shape about an apple? Nobody. Oh, you guys are like theologians. You're locked and loaded. You guys understand this. This is a review that we do not need to do. Here's what I would say. We tend to look at the outward appearance. When we think about Adam and Eve's sin, when we think about our own sin, we ask, well, who got hurt? How does this affect other people? What are the outward consequences? No blood, no foul. If there's no real harm here, if nobody got hurt, like lying. There's certain times when we can all agree lying is bad. There's other times when most of us will say, well, it's a little white lie. This would come up in my marriage, obviously, but maybe for some of you other guys in your marriage, it might come up that your wife gets a new dress, and she asks you, how's it look? And you're thinking one thing in your head, but to you it seems like the right thing to do in that moment is to lie. God calls that sin, you call that, just preserving your own self-interest and having a good afternoon. There's all sorts of things that we justify, that we say, if there isn't an outward consequence, if nothing really bad comes of this, if it feels good, if it works out well for me, cheating on your homework a little bit, cheating on your exam a little bit, it seems like everyone's doing it, and I don't really need to know calculus anyway, so if I can get through this class, and, there's a lot of things that we justify. Same thing when we look at the garden, who really got hurt? What is really the problem? We look at the outward consequences, we look at what we can see. But what I would say is that God looks at the heart. In regard to sin, God is not nearly so much interested with who you're sleeping with or who you're not sleeping with, or how these things are working out on an outward level. But God is radically concerned about what's going on in the heart. And he's concerned about those other things, but not for the reasons that we think, not for a moral checklist. but he is concerned about what is going on inside our hearts in regard to worship. So the way to say this is that God is always most concerned about the sin beneath the sin. Not the outward working, not whether you lied to your wife, not whether you cheated on your taxes, not the outward little things, not the list of rules. But what God is concerned about is the sin beneath the sin. God is concerned about what our outward actions say about our hearts, about who we are hoping in, about who we are trusting in, about what we are counting on in life to give us joy and contentment and satisfaction. Or another way to put it, God is concerned about who we worship, where we place our hope. All right, a few years ago, Tim Keller wrote an awesome book called Counterfeit Gods. If you've been around here for a while, you've heard me recommend it before. Terrific book that's really talking about what the Bible would call idolatry. And he gets into this issue that ever since the fall, ever since Adam and Eve rebelled against God, that there's been something hardwired into every one of their descendants that says, you know what? I'm going to seek my joy and my hope and my satisfaction in something other than God. God wired me to find those things in Him, but I'm going to look for them elsewhere. I'm going to look for them in something that the Bible would call idols. Here's what he says about it. He writes, what is an idol? It is anything more important to you than God. Anything that absorbs your heart and imagination more than God. Anything you seek to give you when only God can give you. A counterfeit God, an idol, is anything so central and essential to your life that should you lose it, your life would feel hardly worth living. An idol is whatever you look at and say in your heart of hearts, if I have that, then I'll feel like my life has meaning. Then I'll know that I have value. Then I'll feel significant and secure. There are many ways to describe that kind of relationship to something. But perhaps the best one is worship. So when we look through that lens, what I would say is that Adam and Eve did not get kicked out of the garden because they ate an apple. Adam and Eve got kicked out of the garden because of what they believed, who they believed, and what they worshipped, what they hoped in. For Adam, his thoughts went something like this. He's got this tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God says, there are certain things that I am shielding you from, the same way that we shield our children. You know, guys, we're calling this PG-13. We don't want you to see this right now. It's not going to be helpful. It's not going to be good for you to see. And God approached humanity the same way. He said, good and evil, all of these things, it is not helpful to you. Right now, husband and wife, you're walking around buck naked, you're not noticing, you're not exploiting, there's no problem here. But if you eat from this tree, you're going to have knowledge, you're going to have understanding that I don't think is going to help you at all. And it is going to change your life. It's going to change how you view the world. But Adam, he said in his heart, man, if I could have that knowledge, if I could know what God knows, if I didn't have to count on Him, if I didn't have to trust Him, if I could be running the show myself and making these decisions for myself, man, that life would be good. I'd really be living. And it's the same thing that we do. We say, man, if this girl in my math class will just pay attention to me, if God, if you will move in her heart that she will say yes to me when I ask her out to go to McDonald's with me later, then my life will really have meaning. Or if I can get this promotion, or if I can move out of my house that seemed amazing 5 years ago and move into a really amazing house, man, my life will be worth living. Or if I can go from a Buick up to a Cadillac, man, my life will be worth living. Some of you, you're like, both of those are old people cars, I don't want either. But there are things that we set our hopes on, man, if I could have that, my life would really be worth living. It would change everything. And what God says is that I want to change everything. I want to come into your life and have a relationship with you that will really change everything for the better. So Adam and Eve, they got kicked out of the garden at the core because Adam and Eve did not believe God. And their lack of faith changed everything. The outward sin was eating the apple. The sin beneath the sin was a lack of faith in God. A lack of trust that God is good, that He is reliable, that He can be trusted. That He is a God who is worthy of my obedience and my allegiance. They did not believe that. They said, I am going to worship myself, I am going to trust myself, and I'm going to look for my fulfillment, my satisfaction, my joy, my contentment elsewhere. God said, you know, that's a violation of the lease. We're not going to relate on those terms. And yet, in that moment, when He kicked them out of the garden, when He said, the penalty for sin is death, you will be outcast from me, you will be set apart from me, eventually you will die. In that same moment, in that same story, you can look it up in Genesis 3 this afternoon. You see God rushing into the garden. Genesis 3:15, he says, I am going to fight for you. I am going to get you back. I am going to send a descendant of the woman who is going to die on the cross as a substitutionary atonement, as a payment for your sins, to win you back, to get you back, to pay the penalty, to be reconciled to me. And that's what we have on Good Friday. The original Good Friday is Jesus Christ coming as a sacrificial lamb. He bled for us, he died for us, he was buried for us, for our sin, but he did not stay dead. And that's what we celebrate on Easter. So let's dig into John 20. Look with me, John chapter 20, the original Easter morning, and we'll see how believing changes us as followers of Jesus. Early on, the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter, the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved. If you haven't read the Gospel of John, you get this phrase a lot, the disciple, the one whom Jesus loved. That's how John refers to himself. And at first blush, that seems kind of arrogant. You know, there's Peter over here, and then there's the one that Jesus loved. That's me, in case you didn't get it. But I would say this isn't a proud thing. This is when John looked in the mirror, when he thought about himself, here's what he saw when he looked in the mirror. Man, I see somebody who Jesus loves. That is my identity. That is who I am. I am the God who Jesus loves. And that's the identity that God wants us to find through the gospel. That we would see ourselves as people who Jesus loves. Carrying on. So Mary came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one who Jesus loved, and said, they've taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they put him. So Peter and the other disciple, they started for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter. No theological reason for that. I think John's just bragging that he's faster. John reached the tomb first, and he bent over, and he looked at the strips of linen lying there, but he didn't go in. So a little bit of humility on John's part. He was afraid. Then Simon Peter, who was behind him, out of breath, he finally arrived. He went into the tomb, and he saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the burial cloth that had been around Jesus' head. The cloth was folded up by itself and separated from the linen. Finally, the other disciple who had reached the tomb first, he also went inside. He saw and believed. They still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. So the disciples, they totally didn't see this thing coming. If you read through the Old Testament, there's tons of prophecies that there's going to be a suffering Savior. That God is going to send someone, a Messiah, who is going to die for their sins. Isaiah 53, it puts it this way. It says, he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. It says that God would lay on him the sins of all of our sins. And Jesus had told his disciples, you can look it up in Matthew chapter 20, he's talking to his disciples, he says, you know what, I'm going to go to the cross, I'm going to die on the cross, and I am not going to stay dead. But when the disciples heard this before the crucifixion and before the resurrection, it just seemed like crazy talk. There were lots of things that Jesus had said that they're like, we totally don't get this. There are times, when they just kind of tune out, blah, 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 Jesus is talking, I don't get it. We'll ask him later what he meant. They did not see this coming. It was kind of like Wichita State making it to the Final Four. Did anyone have that in the bracket? And you lied, you lied. On Easter, oh wait, he's from Kansas. He may have. Sorry, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have doubted you. We're going to get into doubting Thomas later. My bad. Wow, the Shockers, you picked them. Nobody but Pete Melgrim and his cousins back in Kansas saw this thing coming. They didn't see it coming. What about Florida Gulf Coast? You have them in the Sweet 16? See, nobody saw that coming. Absolutely nobody. And that's how it was with the crucifixion. That's how it was with the resurrection. There were prophecies. He laid it out. In hindsight, he told us he was going to do this. Why were we surprised? But they did not see it coming. They had not put it together in their heads. Jesus said, I'm going to die on the cross. I'm not going to stay dead. But it just seemed crazy to them until they saw the burial cloth. And for the first time in their lives, it clicked. They start looking around. Wait a minute. Everything that Jesus was wrapped in is still here. The tomb is still here. Jesus is not here. You know what? I don't think that Jesus is dead. John walked in. He saw these things. It says he saw and he believed. And what I want us to understand here is that believing is a lot more than understanding. All right, there's a reality that I understand calculus. Maybe not as well as I did when I was in college, but I understand it. That understanding has not changed my life. It is simply information. All right, but what we talk about in the Bible, we don't talk about understanding, we talk about believing. So another way to think about it, we don't talk about grasping the truth in your head, but we talk about a truth that grasps you, that grasps your heart, that changes you, that you realize, man, if this is true, man, there are some things that need to change. How I do life, how I do money, how I do priorities, how I do career, everything in my life, how I lead my family. This changes everything. Not just about grasping the truth, but having the truth grasp you. John saw and he believed. So another way of looking at it, when the Bible talks about believing, it's not about knowing something or agreeing that it's true, or here's the doctrinal statement, the creed, I can recite it. It's not knowing and understanding on that level, but it's that I would entrust myself to that truth. Paul talks about it in one of his letters, in 1 Corinthians 15, he talks about the idea, man, if the resurrection isn't true, we are to be pitied above all men. If the resurrection isn't true, my life is a laughingstock because I have reoriented my entire life around this truth. I've entrusted my life to this truth. All right, so when the Bible talks about believing, it means entrusting yourself to it. Another example of that, I believe in ladders. I believe in the strength of my ladder. I believe in the laws of physics. And I believe that while I'm not as athletic as I used to be, that I have the coordination to climb all the way up 2 stories of ladder and kind of swing my legs around and get on my roof. I believe that in my head. In my heart, I don't believe that. I am not willing to entrust myself to the laws of physics. So as some of you guys know, if there comes a day that my chimney needs fixed or that something needs fixed on the roof or somebody needs to go up there, it's not going to be me. Because I do not believe, I'm not ready to entrust myself to the ladder and the law of physics. So what I will do instead is I will call up one of you. I will call up one of you macho tough guys who isn't afraid of heights. And I will say, hey, you want to come show off your manhood and, fix something on my roof, climb up there, be real tough? Great, come on over, I'll bake you some cookies or something because I'm afraid of heights. So maybe I'll ask my wife to bake cookies because I have no skill in the kitchen either. But I am not ready to entrust myself to that. When the Bible talks about believing, it is talking about people who are ready to entrust themselves to this truth. I'm going to live in light of this truth. Everything is going to change because this is true. And I think we all need to ask ourselves, whether you consider yourself a Christian or not, whether you're a Mosaic, regular, first time, or whatever, we need to honestly ask ourselves, do I believe that the resurrection is true? Do I believe that Jesus Christ died for my sins and rose from the grave? And then commissioned me to go and spread that word. Do I believe that it's true or do I agree that it's true? Because if I believe that it's true, then that changes everything. There is no area of our life that is not touched by that reality. Belief in the resurrection, it changes everything and it demands a radical reshaping of all that I am, of my entire life. How does believing in the resurrection change us as followers of Jesus? That's what we see in John. What we see in the next person, in Mary, who comes along in the story, we see how does the resurrection of Jesus, believing in the resurrection, how does that change us as sinners? Because John believed, but what about Mary? Verse 10. Then the disciples went back to their homes, but Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb. And she saw 2 angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They've taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they've put him." So Mary is totally distraught. She has no idea what's going on. She sees 2 angels, but she's crying, she's weeping, she's looking through the tears. She doesn't know they're angels. There's 2 guys in here. They're talking to me. They're wondering why I'm crying. What's wrong with them? For her, she just wanted to see a dead body. All she wanted to do was see the dead body of the one man in her life who had ever given her hope. Who had ever looked at her and said, "Mary, you know what? You can be different. You don't have to be the woman that you were." When we meet Mary earlier in the story, Mary is possessed by 7 demons. Jesus drives out those demons. So Jesus is the person who comes into her life and says, "You don't have to be the woman that you were. You don't have to be unloved. You don't have to be unaccepted. You don't have to feel dirty all the time. You don't have to feel like an outcast. I love you. I accept you. I want to welcome you in. And I want to give you hope that you can change, that your life can be different. Here's what I would say about that. Most of us lack hope that our lives could ever change. We can talk about it in a funny way in the goofy areas of life, like, our waistlines and weight loss and all of those sorts of things. But in the core areas of my life, in my core character issues, my lack of patience, my lack of self-control, my selfishness that I see that rips apart my marriage, that rips apart my relationship with my kids, that just makes me dysfunctional in so many areas of life. My sin problems. Most of us look at those things and we lack hope that could ever change. And so we live in denial. Because it is not going to change, we say in our hearts, well, if I just don't acknowledge that there's really a problem here, then life is better. These people who go around repenting of their sin and saying that things need to change, that's goofy. That sounds awful. That sounds terrible. That sounds really negative. And that's the natural path if there is no hope. Henry David Thoreau, one of his famous quotes, is that the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. Because we look at our lives and we do not find hope. And because we don't find hope, we don't want to talk about the problems in our lives because there's no hope that they're going to change. We're going to keep our desperation quiet. But what we see in followers of Jesus Christ who get the gospel, who understand that there is a God who loves me in spite of me, who understands that we are broken, that we're messed up, that I'm more wretched and sinful than I ever dared believe. And yet at the same time, I'm more loved and accepted by God than I ever dared hope. And when we internalize that thing, we can say, I don't need to live a life of quiet desperation anymore. I can live a life of loud desperation. I can throw myself at the feet of Jesus in hope that the gospel is true, and that if God can raise somebody from the dead, that God could actually change me. That my character flaws, that my vices, that all the things that are messed up inside of me could actually be different. I don't have to pretend that it's okay. I don't have to pretend that I'm okay. I don't have to put on my Sunday best anymore. I can be the real me. That's what Mary had experienced. Mary had experienced hope. And she had seen her life begin to change. Mary had tasted life. Mary had tasted hope in the person of Jesus Christ, and now he was gone. And these men are wondering, why am I crying? My hope is gone. I experienced life with hope, and my hope is gone. She says, they've taken my Lord away, and I don't know where to put him. Verse 14, at this she turned around and she saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize it was Jesus because she was weeping. Woman, he said, why are you crying? Who is it that you're looking for? Thinking he was the gardener, she said, sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you put him, and I will go get him. Jesus said to her, Mary. She turned toward him and cried out, Aramaic, Rabboni, which means teacher. So we see Jesus speak her name. The same name that drove out the demons, the same name that gave hope, the same name that looked at this woman who was a complete outcast and said, you don't have to be outcast anymore. You can be loved. You can be accepted. You don't have to be dysfunctional anymore. Oh, it's going to take some time because your dysfunction is almost as deep as those preacher guys. But you can change. I can help you change. Your life can be different. I can give you hope. She heard that voice who had spoken hope in her life, and she recognized it, and she turned and she cried out. She ran to Jesus. Jesus said to her, do not hold on to me, for I've yet to return to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am returning to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. Mary Magdalene, she went to the disciples with the news, I've seen the Lord. And she told them that he had said these things to her. For Mary, believing changed everything. And most specifically, the resurrection, it gave her a hope that she could change. And that's part of what the resurrection needs to do for us. It needs to give us hope that we can change. We look at our dysfunction, we look at the things that we don't believe we can change, we don't even want to acknowledge we're messed up. But here's the deal. If God can raise a man from the dead, then he can deal with my procrastination. He can deal with my addictions. I can change. There is hope. At this point, it's probably natural to ask, why should I believe in the resurrection to begin with? What evidence do we have that this isn't just some clever story that a bunch of guys made up? And the first thing that I would say is that as stories go, it's not very clever. In all of the gospel accounts, one of the things that we notice is that the first witness to the resurrection is a woman. And, in modern society, that plays really well. In that society, that made for a really dumb story. Because women were extremely marginalized. Women were viewed as a half a notch above slaves. I'm not endorsing that view. I'm not saying that the Bible endorses that view, but it was a reality of that day. And we actually see that the Bible is this countercultural document that is elevating them. But in that day, women were not allowed to testify in court. So you're putting together this evidence, you're putting together the story, this proof that Jesus has risen from the dead, and you write it into every version of your story that the first one seen was a woman. In that culture, that's like saying, my chief witness is a 5-year-old. I'm not endorsing that view, but I'm saying that was the view. No credibility whatsoever. Your audience that you've written to and said, I want you to believe this, most of your audience just pressed mute. They said, I don't care what the crazy person is saying about what some woman saw. I just don't believe it. If you are making up a clever story, you don't write it this way. It's not that clever. There's no way in this culture that they would say that the first witness to a resurrection was a woman unless it was true. And if the resurrection isn't true, how do you explain the empty tomb? How do you explain all of the witnesses to the resurrection? A few years ago, the Da Vinci Code went around. Popular book, heard it was, compelling fiction or whatever, but it was fiction. And it popularized conspiracy theories that, all of this stuff about the resurrection, it was made up after the fact, 300 years later. But the reality is that we have guys like the Apostle Paul, they're writing 15, 20 years after the resurrection, and they're saying things like this. 1 Corinthians 15 says, Jesus appeared to Peter, and then to the 12. After that, he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers at the same time, most of whom are still living. So when Paul wrote that, in that era, he's saying, guys, I didn't make this up. Muhammad, he said he got his revelation in a cave. Joseph Smith, yeah, he was in a cave, he was off in the corner, he was alone when he got it. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about something that's verifiable. He said there were 500 people that saw the resurrected Jesus. Most of them are still alive. They're in Jerusalem. Go look them up, go ask them. This is something that actually happened. Some of us believe that Christianity was born out of a conspiracy. And one of the other problems with that is that, aside from John, who was exiled to the island of Patmos, every other disciple was beaten and tortured and killed for their faith. Conspiracies are good for a period of time, but once the stakes get about so high, they break down. Watergate was an example where once that came to light, they had months to prepare, they got their story straight, they did their whole thing. But once it came to light, within a couple of weeks, the whole thing had fallen apart, and guys had started saying, you know what? I'm not sticking with the story, I'm going to try to save myself. Pascal, a French mathematician, he said it this way: I believe those witnesses who get their throats cut. And that's what we have in the disciples. We have guys who radically changed the trajectory of their lives, changed, and they died for what they did not believe was a lie. They died for what they knew with their own eyes was absolutely true. I believe the witnesses who get their throats cut. Conspiracies only last so long until the stakes get too high, but believing changes everything. The text continues. On that evening of the first day of the week, when the disciples were together, with the doors locked for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and he stood among them, and he said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. Again, Jesus said, "Peace be with you. As the Father sent me, I am sending you." And with that, he breathed on them to receive the Holy Spirit. And with those words, they were changed. These guys, they transitioned from being these cowards who were locked up in the upper room, away from everyone else, denying Jesus, saying, we don't want to have anything to do with this. They changed from that into these men who had tremendous courage and took this message to the ends of the earth to tell everybody about Jesus, because the resurrection changes everything. They said in their hearts, if Christ be God and he died for me, man, no sacrifice is too great that I can make for him. We believe this, we are locked and loaded, we're going for it. But one of the disciples was missing that day. Verse 24. Now Thomas, called Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." This is a guy who understood disappointment. Like Mary, he had understood hope. And he had spent the last 3 years of his life following this guy around, believing everything that he said. He gave his time, he gave his money, he gave his entire life to the idea that this Jesus guy was the Messiah. And over time, he even came to believe, this Jesus guy, this is the Son of God. I'm going to give my life to following him, and now he is dead. And now all of my best friends, all these guys that I've done life with, that I know I can trust, they might prank me at night, they might, steal my covers or something like that, but I know they're honest men. All of them say that they saw this guy alive. I don't believe them. I will not believe them because I have hoped, and I know what it is to have my hope completely disappointed. I'm not going to put my heart out there again and believe that he's alive. The cost is too great for me. So instead he says, I'm going to be a tough guy. I'm going to say, the evidence is there. All my friends are telling me it's true, but I'm not going to believe it. You need to prove it to me if you want me to get back on the Jesus bandwagon. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and he stood among them, and he said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your fingers here. See my hands. Reach out with your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Jesus asked him, "Will you dare to believe?" And Thomas fell at his feet before his Savior, and in that moment, he surrendered everything. In that moment, he was changed. In that moment, he said, "I am all in. I believe that you're God. I believe that you died. I believe that you rose again." Thomas believed, and believing changed absolutely everything. Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." Jesus did many other miraculous signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. And that is the offer that we have on the table. That by believing we may have life in his name. That the sin that separates each of us from God can be removed. That through faith I can be reconciled to the living God. Through faith in the sacrifice of Jesus Christ for my sin. That I don't have to do better. I don't have to try harder. I don't have to clean up my life. I don't have to get things together on the front end. But that God stands ready to accept me, to welcome me, and to send his Holy Spirit into me to change me from the inside out. All of that by grace through faith. If we believe in the resurrection, then the natural response is Thomas's response. To fall on our knees and say, "My Lord and my God. What do you have for me? What do you want from me? How can I follow you? How can I find my joy and life and contentment in you?" And whether you're here for the first time, whether you're Mosaic regular, in and out, here and there, wherever you stand with Jesus or think that you should stand with Jesus, what I would invite all of us to do, what I have been doing all week long, is just wrestling with the question, what do I believe? Do I believe that Jesus Christ died for my sins and rose from the grave? Because if I believe that, it changes absolutely everything. And as much as I want to challenge and invite those of you who are new to Jesus, who are still trying to figure out what you believe about Jesus, is the Bible true? Is any of this stuff true? Man, I want to challenge those of us who are here regularly, who definitely count Jesus as our Savior, who definitely call Mosaic home. Do I believe in the resurrection? Not in a suburban American church kind of a way, where I add Jesus to my keychain. But do I believe that it is true, and has that belief changed everything in my life? Is it transforming me from the inside out? Is it changing how I do career and priorities and money and family and absolutely everything? Do I fall in with guys like the Apostle Paul that looked at his life and he said, you know what, if the resurrection isn't true, then we are to be pitied more than all men. If the resurrection isn't true, then I am an idiot who has wasted my entire life. Or is our concept of belief something less than that? That's what I am wrestling with in my heart. What does it look like for me to live in light of the resurrection? What does it look like for me to allow Jesus to change everything? So whether you're a long-time Christian, a new Christian, on the fence, trying to figure this thing out, I just want to invite you to pray with me. If this is your heart's prayer, pray it with me. If not, just listen along. But I just want to give us the opportunity, wherever we're at with Jesus, whether we're coming to him for the first time, coming back to him, coming to him again, just like we did yesterday, to acknowledge our sin before God and to surrender our lives to him. If that's where your heart is, just join me in that. God, I know that I have sinned against you. God, I know that I often choose my way over your way. But I believe that Jesus died for my sins, that he rose from the grave so that I can have a relationship with you through faith. God, I surrender my life to you. I give you my life. I ask you to forgive me. I ask you to put your Holy Spirit in me to lead me and to give me a heart that's receptive to follow the Holy Spirit. God, I invite you to make me new, to change me from the inside out for your glory, to be my Lord and my God in the name of your Son. Amen. Guys, if that's your prayer, whether first time, long time, whatever, we want to walk alongside you. We want to help you move forward and grow in a relationship with Christ. If you hear all of this evidence for the resurrection, like, I need more evidence, man, there's so much more evidence out there. You can find some of it in podcasts that we have online. We can talk to you one-on-one about the credibility of why we would believe that this is true and why we would give our lives to that belief. In the meantime, I just want to invite the band to come up. We'll just have one or two more songs, and we'll close out and enjoy the rest of our day worshiping God.